Welcome to June, everybody. It is our first Wednesday of the month, Lunch and Learn at the Nonprofit Plug. We have some exciting news to announce today, too. Hey, Mom.
Hey, Lola.
Stacy. Ooh, I see a bunch of familiar faces. Maurice and Erica, who never show their face, but they show up every single month on the dot. Oh, look. Hey, Maurice. Look at that, Miss Tiana Campbell. I see you on here. Hey, Karen. Hi, Diana. And we've got, I think, a couple of new faces. You guys know that I love seeing cameras on because I like to see I'm talking to real people and not to a dead wall. But y'all get a slide on some of these times. But Erica, just know one of these times I'm going to make you have your camera on.
I think you should make her do it now.
Is she prepped? Is she going to kill me? I'm going to get a nasty text.
I'm not ready.
Before I really...
Okay, I'll do it.
I love you guys. We've got a great session today. I've got a co-host. Before we dive in, any wins, milestones, any accomplishments, anything, events coming up? Erica, Maurice, y'all should be raising your hand right now.
Oh, definitely. We're excited. You know,
let's share. Come on.
We had the great news the last Lunch and Learn with the Big Bear trip, and we recently, I think a few days ago, thanks to you and Alex, we got awarded the 2024 Nike Community Impact Fund for $10,000. So that's very good news.
Awesome. Congratulations. So proud of you guys.
Thank you.
So proud of you guys. All right, cool. Any other wins, accomplishments, events anybody wants to share?
Hi, Dr. Sharon. This is Karen. I'm sorry, my camera's not on. I'm actually in 2 meetings. But we're having a 5K walk in September, and I will put that on Facebook. And we are partnering with Cure Duchenne. If you know anything about muscular dystrophy, they're a large organization. So we're really excited about that. And we're hosting it on World Duchenne Day, which is going to be huge because that is the day that they recognize muscular dystrophy across the globe. So thank you for allowing me to share.
You are so welcome, and thank you for sharing that with us. That's good stuff coming up. One more. Anybody else? Oh, Stacy, you want to share something? Oh, go off mute, my dear.
There we go. Yeah, we have a program up and running at the Watts Empowerment Center. Thanks to that introduction, Dr. Sharon. We're going to be doing our communication skills classes with the Summer Night Lights program and with the summer program that they're having for the kids at Watts. So we're pretty excited about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I actually, don't let me forget, I think I actually have another funder for you that I just thought of this morning. So don't let me forget to connect with you later, especially after from this morning.
Okay, great.
Yeah, literally, she just popped into my mind, and It's for Watts. Erica and Maurice, I'm already hooking them up with her. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Stacy. Okay, you guys. We are treatment today. I have our co-host on here today, Dr. Lauren McClain. Dr. Lauren works for Grantably. She'll kind of go over that because I am not going to anywhere do her any justice on my introduction except for that I know her through some reality TV show shit. So this is going to just be so much fun. And she's here to bless us today on program development and evaluation. And like Alex and I like to always say, if you didn't document it, you didn't do it. So if you didn't document that you serve the community, you didn't do it. That's just how it works in the nonprofit sector, going for grants and funding. So Lauren, me and my shitty introduction, please brag about yourself and introduce us to the community. And then you're all set up to share screen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. So like Dr. Sharon said, I'm Dr. Lauren. You can just call me Lauren though. So I am a co-owner, CEO, and principal evaluator for Grantably. I'm a former academic, so I was a sociology professor for 14 years and, really strong emphasis in social research methods and, decided some years before I quit to Grantably as a side hustle. I just love doing research in the community that I could see a direct impact of, that work rather than, academic stuff gets published in journals and nobody reads it and it takes forever. So this, was much more meaningful to do work in the community. And so we started Grantably, and then I just really fell in love with the work and decided I wanted to do it full time. So I quit my tenured faculty position, coming up on a year. June 30th was my last day last year. So coming up on my 1-year anniversary of doing this full time, and I absolutely love it. We really particularly focus, if I had to say, if we had a niche, we really focus on working with nonprofits that have the goal of increasing educational and workforce opportunities for minoritized groups, kind of broadly defined. So, anyone who typically might not have access to opportunities and be sort of systematically discriminated against and those kinds of things. We really, sociologists, those kind of structural issues are sort of near and dear to our heart, making things better for others. So our tagline is evaluation to do more good, because we know that you're already doing amazing work in all of the nonprofits where you're at and all the programs that you're running. And so our job is to just help you, like Dr. Sharon said, document it so that you can show others what you've done, that you can get more funding and so you can do more good, right? Like you can build better programs, you can reach more people, you can, get more funding. So that's our goal. But with that in mind, I wanted to just start by asking, like, how many of you are really familiar with evaluation? Like, is anybody, I'll maybe ask the flip side of the question. Anyone like never heard of evaluation or doesn't really fully understand like what that is? See, without the camera, it's hard because you can't.
Listen, I'm already going to tell you, and I'm going to throw their names out there if they don't put a camera back on. Maurice and Erica, but I'm for sure this is probably a brand new topic to majority of the group. This is a great opportunity for us.
Okay. Awesome. Well, like I said, I'm a former professor. I'm going to use my PowerPoint, but feel free, to jump in at any time if you have questions. Feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to try to keep an eye on the chat. Dr. Sharon's going to help me with that. So if you have any questions as we go, feel free to interrupt. If you want to wait till the end, that's fine too. And so I am going to start pretty basic, and then we'll kind of build a little bit, and then hopefully by the end you'll feel like you got a good handle on all this. So let me just share my screen, and I have multiple screens here and stuff. So just if I'm looking in another direction or something, that's probably why. But yeah, I'm going to move this over here, and I'm going to get my chat back if I can. Maybe I can get my chat back.
I can always help monitor the chat for you.
There it is.
I know.
Okay. I got it.
I guess we already got a comment. Thank you, Paul. Like I totally agree. Says I know about evaluation, and it's way complicated.
It doesn't have to be way complicated, but when you have someone who that's their expertise, that can be helpful to kind of break it down for you. I like to be able to break it down so that it's not super scary. That was my favorite thing about teaching social research methods. Students always came in like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so hard and so complicated, and I don't know what to expect. And then I would just make them feel better about it. And at the end, they'd be like, that wasn't so bad. So that was always my favorite thing by the end of the semester. So, all right, so let's get into it. So measuring what matters, understanding your impact through evaluation. That is what we're talking about today. And these are just sort of the things we're going to go over. Like I said, I'm going to start very basic. Just what is evaluation? I'm going to talk about the value of evaluation for nonprofits, because I think a lot of times people think that sometimes they feel like maybe it's something they have to do or that they should do, and they don't really see why it's so important. And so I think when you understand why it's so important, then it becomes something that's a little bit more exciting to think about. I'm going to talk about some common evaluation frameworks. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but just to kind of give you a working understanding. So if you hear a term or something, you can say, oh yeah, I've heard of that before. we're going to talk about some ways that you can measure impact. And so, like the title says, let's talk about measurement. And then how do you get started with evaluation? So, if you really don't really know much about it, like what are some first basic things that you could consider doing? And then finally, what's it like to work with an evaluator? So if you did want to hire somebody like me or somebody, another evaluator, what would that look like? Okay. And then, like I said, feel free to answer, ask questions, at any time, but we'll do some Q&A at the end as well. All right. So what is evaluation? This is the slide that has the most words on it because I wanted to put the whole definition on here just to make sure that everybody really feels good about it. So what it is, a systematic process of determining strengths and opportunities for improvement for a project, a policy, a program, or a product. So pretty much anything can be evaluated. And all we're doing with evaluation, it's one kind of goal of research methods. So it's about taking research methods, that's that systematic process, right? Like going through a series of steps with some good measurement tools that we're going to talk about in a minute. And really the goal is, what are the strengths? And then what are some opportunities for improvement if there are some, right? And so rarely is any program or project ever perfect, right? There's usually always something that we can tweak to make a little bit better. But really the key is we want to highlight the strengths. And I think that's one really big misconception of evaluation is, I've heard people say like, well, they're just going to come in and tell us everything we're doing wrong. And it's like, no, that's not the point. Like the point of evaluation is to be very uplifting and to build it up and like highlight those strengths. And again, if there's some opportunities to improve, we'll talk about those. But really, we want to collect data. I like to call it data storytelling, right? So we're telling the story of what your nonprofit is doing or what that program is doing through data. Okay. So for nonprofits, typically what this looks like is assessing effectiveness or an impact of an organization's programs or initiatives, with the goal of guiding decision making and then supporting accountability and learning. Some other things that this could be is also a needs assessment. So if you're at the very start and you're like, I don't know what this community really needs, like I have some ideas, but we need to figure that out so we can plan the best project for them, we would do a needs assessment. If you want to really think about your process, what is, let's say you have a 6-month program for youth, right? And you want to look at what is the process? How are they recruited? How are they brought into the program? What does the like kind of onboarding look like? How much are their parents involved? What are the teachers or the people that are working, with the youth, like, how are we hiring them and what's their role? Like that would be sort of a process evaluation. What are the steps that we take throughout the process? And then facilitation is another one. One of the sort of frameworks I'm going to talk about is like a participatory framework where you're really, you want to hear people's voices and get them involved. And so facilitation is another thing we can do within the organization or in the community that the organization serves, facilitating some of those conversations to make sure that you're offering, the best thing that you can for the communities that you serve. Okay. Are there any questions just right now about the definition? I do technically one more slide on what is evaluation, but just see if anybody, I don't see anything in the chat, but. All right. So when we think about evaluation, like I said, it's systematic. It's scientific-ish, right? We don't, we're not getting published in peer-reviewed journals usually after this, which is kind of the final piece in scientific stuff. But we still like to follow those principles, right? Try to take as much objectivity out of it and do good measurement and that kind of thing. So the first piece is that measurement part, right? Which is collecting the data. How do we do that? That can be a lot of different ways. We can talk about surveys, focus groups, interviews, just counting the number of people that attend a webinar that you offer or a lunch and learn or, things like that, right? What's, just what kind of impact are you having? How many people came to an event? There's all kinds of things, and I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a minute, but that's collecting the data. And so once we collect the data though, and there's a lot of organizations that are really, they collect data and then they just don't do anything with it. And so then that's the next piece is the assessment. That's where you actually have to analyze that data. You have to look at it and you have to think about, what does this data telling us? What does it mean? Are there patterns in this data that maybe, for instance, maybe women are being helped more than men, or older people are more satisfied with your service than younger people, and, that kind of thing. So we can look at, through analyzing that data, we can kind of look at trends and patterns, and we can see, really what's going on in your program. And then all of that leads to learning. So the goal of all of this, of doing this evaluation, collecting and analyzing this data, is to make data-driven decisions, right? We want to be able to say, okay, so based on this data, here are things people really like, and these are the things we want to highlight and we want to keep doing, and we want to maybe even put more resources towards those things. And then if there's things that need to be improved, then we can say, okay, well, let's think about, let's strategize now. How can we address this concern that we heard multiple times from, people that were in our program, right? Or people that we serve. And so then we can think about how to make those programs even better, right? Like our tagline, evaluation to do more good, right? How do you make them even a little bit better? And then, how do you make those decisions about how to tweak a program? Maybe you find that you need to go in a totally different direction, that maybe there's, room for a new program that you might want to start, or there's maybe a group of people that's not being served with your original thing, and we need to, form something for them. There's all kinds of things that can come out of this, but the ultimate goal is to just help you do more good, right? Help you do what you do even better. So we need all of those pieces in order to be able to do that. Okay. So what is the value of evaluation for nonprofits? So you're hearing me say okay, we should collect this data and we should analyze it, but what do we, what's the point, right? The first one, I'm going to start with the most boring one, right, is just compliance and accountability, right? So a lot of times if you are, a nonprofit, you're probably grant funded or getting money from the state or something like that. And so sometimes you have to report back to them, and sometimes they will require evaluation. Sometimes they won't. But when you report back to them and tell them what it is that you're doing with their money, having data to support what that narrative is really important, right? Because it helps you be accountable to them for how their money is being spent. And it also highlights what you're doing. Look at this impact that we're having, right? And so at a most basic level, it's about compliance and accountability. But I think it goes way beyond that and gets way more exciting than that. So stakeholder engagement and trust, right? If your stakeholders, whether that's your board members, whether that's people in the community that support you, whether that's your funders, or even just the people that you serve, if they know that you care about collecting data and analyzing it and making data-informed decisions to make your programs better, that increases their level of trust. And often those stakeholders are then involved in that data collection. And so that gets them even more engaged in what you're doing. And then they know, again, that you care about your results, because we all do this work because we care, right? And we all know that when you care about something, you're just like, well, of course it's great, right? And of course I'm doing really good work. But when you can show that with data, it just adds another level of trust to what it is that you're putting out in the community. It also fosters organizational learning and growth, right? So if your nonprofit has that as a value, right? That we want to always be learning and growing as an organization, then data is a huge part of that, right? And so when you are collecting data and you're reviewing it, and then you're having those meetings to, facilitate conversations or think strategically about what you want to do next, that just, fosters that value of organizational learning and growth. And so evaluation is a big part of that. And like I said, it also helps with that strategic planning. You have what you're doing today, but what are your goals? What are your goals for the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years? I know I don't really like thinking about strategic planning. Sometimes it can be boring, but sometimes it can be super exciting, right? Because it's like, where are we going? And when you have data to inform those decisions and prioritize what it is, where you're going to focus your time and your efforts, then that gets really exciting. And then making informed decisions, right? So like I said, if, you can be as excited as you want to be about a program or something that you're offering, but unless you know that it's really making the impact that you want it to make, we need to think about what things, do we need to enhance, and then what things maybe do we need to tweak or change to make things even better. So having that data helps you make those decisions. And then it's not just like well, I think that we should do this. Well, that's great from your perspective that you think that, and that's a fantastic starting point. But what do the people you serve think? What did they want? What do they need? And so making data-informed decisions is a good way to go to make sure everybody's on the same page moving forward, and that you're providing the best services that you can. And then, so that goes along with enhancing program effectiveness. If you can make your programs more effective, then you're going to serve more people. You're going to get those outcomes that you're really looking for, right? So if your goal is to increase self-esteem among young girls, and you know that your program is really doing that, and that girls are, just walking around like they're just, they're doing great because their self-esteem has been raised so much from this program, then that's fantastic, right? And you can enhance that and you can do it even better. So again, the goal is always just offering the best services that you can. And then it's also a way to find more funding, right? So when you show funders that, hey, we are collecting data on what we're doing, we're analyzing it, we're making data-driven decisions, and this is why we need this next amount of funding because we want to, increase our efforts over here, then that goes a long way, right? And I have even encouraged people, and I know, we have some clients that evaluation wasn't required by the funder, but because they put an evaluation budget into their grant, it increased that trust, right? Going back to the second point, right? It increased trust because they knew that these people were serious about what they were doing and that they weren't just going to get this money and blow it, that they were actually going to collect data and be able to show at the end the impact of what it was that they did with those funds. And so that really increases trust. I think it can increase your competitiveness for grant funding. And again, just shows that you really are committed to learning and growth. And also other resource attraction too. So resource attraction doesn't necessarily have to be funding. It could be support by local politicians or local leaders in your sector. It could also lead to innovative partnerships and things like that, right? Like if you have an education program, maybe you can connect more with the schools. And again, they're going to trust you more if they know that you're really collecting that data and that you are committed to that learning and growth internally as well. And then you can demonstrate impact, right? And so, if you think about what you do and, what we said at the beginning, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen, right? How do you use that? Do you have a newsletter that you put out? Do you put things out on social media? Do you have an annual report? When you have, again, which sounds better to you? We went out and we did a great job this year and we had this mission and this passion and we did great. Versus saying, we had this mission and this passion and this set of goals, and we were able to impact 1,000 young girls in schools this year. And, 85% of them showed an increase in their self-esteem after going through this, after this program. And, 90% of them said that they're now excited about their futures or whatever it is that you do, right? Which sounds better? The one with the data or the one that's just, yep, we did great, So if you think about how you can communicate your impact, right? Numbers help a lot, right? And so then you can really show, how many people did you serve? What was the impact of the programs that you offered? And being able to do that and show charts and, things like that. You don't want to get too nerdy. I could get very, very nerdy when it comes to data, but you can show it in a really visually appealing way, that really gets eyes on what it is that you're doing. And so again, all of that and our goal as evaluators is to help you do more good, right? If you do all it, when you have all of this in mind about what the value of this kind of work is, then you really can have even a greater impact, get more money, grow, impact more people. And that's what it's all about. So we're really excited. And when I say we, I don't just mean at Grantly. I mean, evaluators are usually really excited about this, but certainly as Grantly, we'd be more than happy to help you with this too. All right. Any questions about the value of not evaluation before I move on?
Sure, I guess I could ask.
Okay.
If we're working with a grassroots or early stage nonprofit, and like, how would you recommend they go ahead and get started on this? Unless that's going to come later in the slide.
That's actually a later slide. So yes, I will come back to that. So you can hold me to it. Karen, you unmuted. Hi, Karen, by the way. No, maybe an accidental unmute. All right. If you do have a question, just feel free to jump in. All right.
Oh wait, hold on. Let me see. I'm also getting direct messages, so I'm going through a couple of them. Make sure it's not a question. Okay. Nope. You're good. We're caught up. Yep. I'm responding.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. So like I said, I'm not going to go super deep into evaluation frameworks, but these are just terms that you might hear. And so I just want to throw them out there so you can at least have some familiarity with them, if in case someone asks. Okay. So the most common two sort of theoretical, evaluation frameworks are a logic model and a theory of change. Okay. So a logic model is usually in table form, and it just has what is the goal, what are the inputs that we're putting in. So, whether that's personnel or time or whatever, what are the outputs? So, the number of students that are going to graduate from this program or whatever that might be. The inputs, the activities. So what are the activities that you're doing in the program? Then what are the outputs? And then what's the outcome, which is the more like the output is like, we're going to graduate 75% of the students who enrolled in our program. And then the outcome is, what that's doing for them, right? So if it's a job placement program, then you're going to say that, students are prepared, to be hired into jobs in XYZ industry, or something like along those lines. And then the last column that I always put as the evaluator is the evaluation. So how are you going to measure each of those things within that particular goal? Okay. So a logic model, and I can send, I don't know if you would send the recording, maybe we can send an example or something like that of this. But, so a logic model is very simple. What's going into this process? What's happening during the process? And then what are we expecting out of it? And then how are we going to measure that? A theory of change is just a little bit deeper than a logic model. It really talks about sort of the changes that we want to make within a program or within a community, and how our program is going to impact those changes. And so it's very similar to a logic model. It just goes a little bit deeper because it's talking more about behavior change. Most of the time, a theory of change is talking about behavior change. And so you're really thinking about, like, if maybe your nonprofit is to get people to vote more, and you want to, between now and the election, you're going to be hosting a number of events, maybe go knocking on doors, maybe you have a text message campaign, that kind of thing. And the theory of change is going to talk about what are the things that you're doing to impact change in your community to increase the voting turnout rate to whatever the goal is. Okay, so that would be kind of an example of a theory of change. And again, it's just a little bit deeper than a logic model. If you have questions about those, we can certainly talk about them. Sometimes when you apply for grants, they might ask for one of those. And so again, it's just something I wanted you to be a little bit familiar with. Not the main goal of my talk today, but I wanted to at least throw them out there. Some other ones that are really exciting because they're really more about the research methods and the things that I geek out about is outcome mapping. And so this is an evaluation framework that really looks at the outcomes of a program. This would also be called ripple effects mapping, which is really cool if you want to look and see how the impact of your program ripples out into the community in other ways. That's a really fun technique to do. So if you want to really focus on outcomes and the impact that you're having, an outcome mapping process would be really, really fun to do. Empowerment evaluation is another one that I love. And empowerment evaluation is really about hearing from the people that you are trying to help, people that are usually marginalized in some way, that we're kind of amplifying their voices even more. Now, I like to do this in every evaluation that I do. I feel like, all of our evaluations really come from kind of this, culturally responsive, equitable, empowerment type approach, because that's just something that we value. But a true empowerment evaluation really has to do with really emphasizing the voices of the people who have less power in the situation and making sure that their voices are heard so that we can evaluate the program primarily from their perspective. So that's really fun. And then the participatory evaluation and these can kind of be combined. You can do a participatory empowerment evaluation, but participatory evaluation is really when you have a lot more. When I think about the measures, it's like not just like a survey and a focus group. It's like doing like work groups where we're facilitating conversations and like really getting people's input on what it is that they're doing and what's working and what's not. A lot of times you do this within organizations, right? You can do this also in the community and with participants, but a lot of times this is really cool to do. We're working on an engagement right now where that's what we're doing. We're working within a nonprofit to help facilitate those conversations so that the staff of the organization really can have say and input in the direction that we're going with this particular topic. And so anyway, so those are really fun. You can do some really cool techniques and ways of collecting data through those. So you're really amplifying people's voices and they're very much participating in the process rather than us just kind of coming in, collecting some data and leaving and then like sending a report via email. It's really a much more engaged process. So it's a lot more fun for everyone, I think. All right. I know that was like a very like surface level discussion of all of these things. Again, if there's any ones you want to talk about in more detail in the Q&A, we can certainly do that. So how do you measure impact, right? And what are some ways that you can collect data to measure? So you can do quantitative measures. These are ones that are very, probably a lot of people have heard of. You can do surveys of your participants. So again, if you have a program that people are going through or an event you're hosting, you can have them fill out a little survey on the way out and see, kind of what they took from the event. What did they learn? Are they going to do anything different after the event based on what they learned? Again, these things all depend on what your goals are. A pre-test and a post-test, this is particularly when you're doing something kind of knowledge-based, right? So like a job prep program, where are people when they come in and then where are people by the time that they leave and see, how have their skills and their confidence and all of that sort of increased over time. So those are, some basic quantitative measures that we can do. Qualitative measures are things like interviews and focus groups. So, an interview is usually just one-on-one where we're just, have a list of questions and we're asking questions to stakeholders or to participants about what their experience has been, and that kind of thing. Focus groups are really good when you have a lot of people and you want to talk to them because you want to hear those stories and get those narratives. But it would take too much time to do interviews. So if you get a small group of people together, usually, I would say no more than like 15 would be like the absolute max. I like to try to stay between 10 to 12. And then you have a list of questions that you ask, and then you hear from people like what they, what they think about the program, and they'll kind of riff off each other and stuff like that. So that's kind of fun. A good way to collect a lot of data in a shorter amount of time than doing like 20 or 30 interviews. Indirect measurements, this could be looking at like your social media engagement, for example. So let's say you have like a big social media campaign that you're putting out to increase awareness of a particular topic, right? Like it's Pride Month right now. So maybe you've got maybe that's your focus of your nonprofit. So you're putting out, a lot of information and things like that through social media. Indirect measurements would be like looking at your engagement, how many people, liked, commented on a post, how many more followers do you have as a result of those posts, things like that. If you have a link to click on, how many people clicked on the link from, the social media post and that kind of thing. So that's one way to sort of measure engagement and impact. You can also look at things like event attendance, right? Where you're not necessarily, I always think it's a good idea to collect data from people, but sometimes if you have a lot of events or frequent events or just a huge event, maybe it's, maybe you just don't have the capacity to do that. At least counting how many people are there is a really great way to be able to say, we offered X number of events this year and X number of people attended, and that's a way to show that you got the message out to those people. And there's a lot of other indirect measurements, I'm sure, just depending on, what your goals are and that kind of thing. Indirect measurements, I guess the most basic way I like to explain them is where you're not interacting with people. You're not asking for data from other people. So it's kind of like the textbook definition is like things they left behind. Like, things you can collect about them without actually interacting with them, like their social media posts. You don't have to contact those people. You just know that they clicked, right? So that's what an indirect measurement is. And then community feedback, can look a lot of different ways, right? So, maybe there's, you're doing a lot of community development things. Maybe you're going to the city commission meetings or something like that to hear about what their concerns are, what people's concerns are about the community. Maybe you're getting satisfaction surveys from your clients, right? So if you have people coming in for mental health services, then maybe you're doing, when they leave, they're getting a survey via email to say, what did you think of the services that you got? So that's technically a survey, but it's a way of getting information from the community. So, what I want you to take away from this is that there's a lot of different ways that we can do measurement, right? Like when we talk about measuring data and collecting data, there's a lot of ways we can do that. And these things take varying levels of knowledge and skill and money and time. So the biggest thing for you is to figure out what data do you need and how can you get that data within your budget and with the skills that you have, right? And so sometimes you can do some of these things yourselves, right? Like sometimes you don't need an external evaluator. You maybe have someone that works at your organization who's been through a couple research methods classes and can put together a basic survey, with a few questions. And maybe that's enough for right now. Maybe it is just about counting the number of people that attend your events and seeing, what, is there growth in the attendance over time? Or maybe it is just looking at how many people, click on your social media posts and that kind of thing. If that's all you can do right now, then that's all you can do right now, right? But if you maybe have a little bit more money or you get a grant that requires it, so it's a line item, maybe you do hire a consultant to come in and to do some of these other things that maybe you don't have the time and the capacity to do, right? Interviews and focus groups and ripple effects mapping and those more qualitative techniques, they're a lot more time intensive. So, maybe that is something that you hire somebody to come in and do. Or maybe you just hire a consultant to come in and review a survey or look at your system and just give you some feedback, just like on a consultation basis. So there's a lot of things you can do. And then all the way at the other end of the spectrum, you could hire an internal evaluator. So if you get to that point, you could actually even have an internal evaluator that does all of this, and that's their entire job, right, at your organization. So, again, I know a lot of people here are just starting out, and so that might be something for the future. But these are just all things to think of. And I think at the end of the day, what I want you to take from this is there's a lot of ways to do measurement. just find what works for you and what you can handle right now. Okay. And then you can always build if you're like, it'd be really cool to do some of those other techniques, then build towards that. And that, that you'll get there.
Dr. Lauren, one of our questions is, she runs a bunch of focus groups for their nonprofit. They don't have the information from those focus groups or what comes in. So she's wondering, in what ways can we quantify qualitative data?
So that's a really good question. So you can do things like word count, like you can do, it's called thematic coding, where sometimes this requires a software program. Depending on how much data, you could probably get away with doing it like in Excel or something. But where you would go through and you would look at what people say and code usually each line, as something, right? So for example, I'll just give you an example from a recent focus group that we did where we were talking to students that were going through, a new program at a university that they just started this program. And so they want to see what students think about it, right? So we could go through those focus groups and we can say, okay, how many people, acknowledged, like we could look at the strengths, right? How many people said something positive about the faculty? How many people said something positive about the structure of the courses? How many people said something positive about the funding that they're getting to participate in the program? How many people said something positive about it's like a hybrid program, so some of it's online. So how many people said something positive about the format of the courses, right? And then we could go through and also say how many people said something negative about the faculty, the format, the course, whatever like that. So you can kind of code those sentences, and I would read through them first, right? And that's always the first thing, read through them all and have a list that is kind of like, okay, here's some things I'm seeing. You can also use AI to do this too. You can run the transcripts through AI and ask it to pull out the themes, which is also pretty cool. But that's what I would do. I would read through them and I would be like, okay, here are some of the main themes that are coming up. And then I would go through and code those sentences and say, okay, yeah, this sentence, check box here, the sentence, check box over here. And then you could kind of count that way. And you could say, we did focus groups that involved 40 people and, there were, I don't know, 40 mentions about positive faculty engagements, and there were 35, mentions of, people that liked the courses, the structure. But then there was maybe, 7 or 8 mentions of, people that had a negative experience with a faculty member or something like that, right? So you can kind of quantify it that way in terms of the themes that come out. So that's what I would do. If you did want to use a software program to do that, there's 2 that are really good. In Vivo is one of them. And then, I'm drawing a blank on the other one, but hopefully it'll come to me by the end. In Vivo and, Atlas TI. That's the other one. So those are 2, qualitative coding programs that you could use if you wanted to. I don't think they're super expensive either. Maybe you have to look into that, but hopefully that helps. Yes. Oh, look, I looked over. You all help me out. Atlas and Vivo. Yes. Very good. Any other questions before we move on? All right. You're welcome. So how do you get started with evaluation? So this is getting back to Alex's question earlier. If you're just getting started and you need to figure out what's going on. The first thing that I always say is define clear goals and objectives. If you don't know what your goals are, how are you going to collect data to measure whether you're meeting those goals, right? So always know what the goals are. And I always it kind of makes me happy and smile inside, but I always have to take a step back when people are like, we need to collect data. And what kind of data should we collect? And, really excited about this new technique and, blah, blah, blah. And what, and I'm like, okay, but what are you trying to find out? Right? So I get excited when people are excited about data, but then you always got to step back and say, all right, but what do you want to know first. That's always the first question. What do you want to know? What are your goals? What are your objectives, right? If you have that in mind, and now you can figure out how do you measure what you need to measure in order to see whether or not you're meeting those goals and objectives. So start with that clear definition first. Then develop an evaluation plan, right? So now I know where I want to go. Let's work backwards and figure out what data do we need to be able to get there. Okay. And an evaluation plan is just, like I said, what measures are you going to use? Who are you going to talk to? What kind of timeline do you have? Do you have a budget or not, right? Like these are the things that go in an evaluation plan, right? So if you have, stakeholders, and again, I'll just use an example of, you have a program that's going to educate kids in some way. Maybe the stakeholders are the people at the schools that are going to be referring to the students to you. Maybe it's the parents. If it's a preparation for job placement, maybe you want to talk to some people in industry that are the jobs where they're going to be placed to see what they think about this program and how it's set up. And then of course the students themselves would be. So who are you going to talk to? How are you going to collect that data? The timeline, and if there's a budget. Selecting those, I kind of got ahead of myself, I guess. That all goes into the evaluation plan, right? So selecting appropriate evaluation frameworks and the methods that you're going to use. And then building that evaluation capacity, right? So again, who at your organization has the skills to be able to do these things? And if they don't, then finding someone who does, right? Whether that's an external consultant like me, whether you're hiring somebody that has these skills, and consultants also can help with building that capacity, right? So a lot of times we say that like we're kind of, in some cases when we do capacity building, like we're kind of working our way out of the job. Like the goal in a capacity building is let us train you to be able to do these things so that you don't need me anymore, right? And so, that's something that you can do is you can hire an evaluator to help you build that capacity. Once you get that system down, that process down, those measurement tools, you have a basic understanding of how to analyze them and how to spit, that stuff out and to build a report, then you don't need us any longer. And you can do it yourself. So that's a good use of, funds in the beginning to build that capacity. And then you want to engage your stakeholders, right? So engage the people that you're working with, the people who are the recipients of your programs, the people who are funding them, the people who, are on your board, and really engage those stakeholders. Let them know that you're doing this evaluation, why you're doing it, what the value of it is to you, what the value is to them, right? So like, a lot of times people, I don't want to take 5 minutes to fill out a survey, but if I know that it's going to benefit me because you're going to give me a better service because of it, then I'm going to be more inclined to do it, right? So really engage them about why you're doing this and why it matters. You always want to test your tools. If you work with an external consultant, they'll do this for you. But whenever you have a new survey or something like that, always let people look at it first. A lot of times we can get in our heads about these things and be like, oh, I don't want to share it with somebody or I'm embarrassed or whatever. But like, you need the feedback because sometimes it makes perfect sense to you. And then someone else reads it and they're like, I don't understand what you mean by this question, right? Or these response categories aren't clear. And so making sure you do that before you do a full rollout of a survey or something like that is a good idea. You want to collect that data systematically and ethically, right? So you always want to tell anybody who you're providing a service to that this is voluntary, right? That you're not going to stop providing the service if they don't participate. You always want to make that really clear that this is totally voluntary. If you can, don't attach names to things. Certainly don't report anybody's name when you're reporting out results. And really just, collecting that data in a way, like it's not like, oh, well, I think this person really likes our program, so let's ask them to participate. But this person, they've complained a lot, so we're not going to ask them, right? That's not good. That doesn't work. Make sure that you're collecting data systematically and ethically. And then I know that sounds obvious, but analyze and interpret the data. Like I said, a lot of organizations, they collect all this data and they're like, we don't know what to do with it, right? It's what's the point of collecting it if you're not going to actually follow through and analyze it and interpret it and then write a report and then use the findings to make decisions. And here's the thing I just want to also say. If, again, we do this work and you all do this work because it is so near and dear to your heart and you're passionate about it and you care about it and you want to do good. And the thing that I will say is, especially in the beginning, you might have some great idea about this program that you want to run. And then you collect data and you find that some people don't like some things about it. You have got to be open to making changes, right? Because if you want to provide the best service you can, then you need to listen to the people who are actually going through it and are supposed to be benefiting from what you're providing. And so sometimes you do have to check your ego at the door a little bit. Okay. And be willing to, get that feedback. If you're going to ask for it, then you got to be willing to read it. And then if enough people, if one person's complaining, then maybe you ignore it, right? But if it's like half the people that are participating are saying, I don't know, I don't really like this format, or I didn't really get the most out of it, you got to be willing to make some changes and look to the data about what to change, right? They'll tell you what they want if you ask them, right? And so I think that that's really, really important, to report and then use those findings. The other thing I will say is don't ask people for data that you don't intend to use on, time is valuable, right? Do you want to do things that are a complete waste of time? No, none of us do, right? So if you're going to ask people to take time to do this data collection, show them how you're using it, right? If you're just going to ask them to fill out a survey and they're going to take 5 minutes to do that and then you're never going to look at it again, you just wasted 5 minutes of their time. So really just be considerate about that and go into it with the goal of improvement and using findings, because nobody wants to spend their time on things that just go nowhere. Especially when you're talking about vulnerable populations. And I just want to make that really clear. When you're talking about a vulnerable population that, has been given the runaround on things and have had a really hard time, and then especially if you're asking for vulnerable information, make sure that you plan to use it and use it ethically and appropriately. And I know that you all will. And then plan for ongoing evaluation, right? So how are you going to continue to do this? How frequently do you do an evaluation? That totally depends on your goals. It totally depends on your goals. It totally depends on your program. If your program is like someone comes in today and they leave this afternoon and that's it, like it's a day-long program or something like that, then you're probably going to want to collect data every single day, right? From every new group of people that comes in. If it's a 6-month program or a year-long program, then maybe you collect data at the beginning and at the end. It really just depends. Are you doing events? Are you doing, are you giving scholarships? Are you providing funds? It really just depends on what your goals are. And we could certainly sit down and do a free consultation and we can talk about what it is that you're doing and then kind of come up with a plan that is best for your particular goals. So it's a fantastic question. It's just one that's hard to think about, without knowing the details of what you're doing. Yes, I see Dr. Sharon answered a question, both qualitative and quantitative. So client testimonials. Yeah, absolutely. I think that they're both great. The thing about testimonials that someone gives you voluntarily is you're probably going to get the very best and the very worst, right? Like the people who just loved your program, it's like course evaluations for faculty, right? Like the ones that go out right by professor. It's like the ones who either really loved the class and they just want to give that star, review. And then the ones that absolutely hated it. And so you don't get a lot in between. When you do a survey of everybody, then you're more likely to get answers along the gamut, right, of people with different experiences, different backgrounds, different reasons for participating and that kind of thing. So I think that the testimonials are really great. I wouldn't put a ton of weight in them alone if they're voluntary. But I think that they're great, and any data is good data to show what you're doing. Right. And then, so I do like survey data, but I also do like the qualitative, right? Because the qualitative, is where you really get those narratives. You really get to hear the impact that it had, right? Like I can say 20 people showed up to the event today, right? But if I can also say 20 people showed up for the event today, and then here's 3 quotes from people who said that this just changed their life, you know, it just hits different, you know? So I think having both of those things are really important. We are almost out of time, so I'm get to this.
I'd say maybe Alex has another really great question in the chat too, okay. And maybe if you've got
I've got one more slide after this, so I'm almost done. Yeah, almost done.
Awesome.
Okay, so how do you convey the importance of starting to consistently collect data if it seems like it'll be it will slow processes down or is too challenging to get participants' time? Let's see. I think that you can get a lot of data in a very short amount of time, right? So people are always shocked with surveys. I literally had 100 question survey one time, and it probably took at most 10 minutes, right? So if some people are I don't want a survey that's more than 5 questions. 5 questions will literally take a minute. So I would say if you want a survey to be 5 minutes or less, 20 questions or less is probably good. But again, 20 questions, that's a lot of data, right? In just a few minutes. So I think that that's something that is, you can do, and I don't think will slow things down too much. I do think incentives are good if you want to do something that's a little bit longer, if you're going to do an interview or a focus group or something that's going to take a lot more time from people. I think having some kind of an incentive is a good idea. Incentives are always a little tricky because you don't want it to be so much that it is coercive. And you might not have a lot of money, especially when you're starting out, that you might not even have a lot, but giving someone even $5 or, a gas card or, if it's a focus group, you can provide pizza and soda. That's a good incentive. Just giving some people something for their time, I think is a good idea. And in terms of just slowing down the process, I think the sooner you build in these evaluation metrics into your process, they just become part of it. Then they don't become an additional thing that's now we got to collect data, right? It just becomes okay, we sign someone up and then we, enter their data in here. And then when they, come to the program, we give them this survey at the start and then, they go through it. And then at the end, we give them this other survey and then we ask them to participate in a focus group. It just kind of becomes part of what you're doing. So to the extent you can build that in now, that is a good idea. Okay, sorry, I really want to working with young children who are different abilities. Yes, it absolutely can be done verbally. I think you always should consider your audience, right? If you're talking to kids, you're going to have a very different set, very different survey or a very different set of questions than if you're talking to college educated 40-year-olds, right? Or people who are developmentally disabled or people who speak another language as their first language, right? So you always need to adapt these methods to your audience. So you can absolutely ask questions verbally. You can give people the choice, right? So we've done this with collecting data for homeless people, right? We had a survey. So if they wanted to fill it out on their own, they could, but a lot of them couldn't read or write. And so we would say, or we can ask you the questions. And so they might opt to do that. So I think giving people options is a good idea. If you can, absolutely think about your audience for sure. These are fantastic questions. I'm glad you all are thinking about this.
Really good about today.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. My very last slide here. What is it like to work with an evaluator? So if you did want to work with a consultant, me or someone else, having that external perspective brings in some objectivity to it. So like I said, you all are so close to what you're doing that, you ever get in an argument with your spouse or your best friend or something like that, and you're so close to it and you just know that you're right. And then your best friend comes in and is maybe you shouldn't have said it like that. We've all had those situations and you're okay. Because when you have those external eyes that aren't as invested, they kind of see things differently. And so bringing in an external evaluator is really great for that, where we have a different lens that we're looking at the work that you're doing through. And so having that, that perspective can be super helpful. And again, when it comes to trust and stakeholders and funders, they like to see that it's someone else that's coming in and doing this. Because if I say you're doing great as an external person, it weighs a little different than when you just say you're doing great. I don't want to make you feel bad by saying that, but it's just when you're doing the work, right? Like it just, when someone else, it's like, you know, your kids, when your teacher, like I can think my kids are great, but when my teacher says my kids are great, I'm like, okay, I'm doing a good job, right? So it's just kind of like that. So being transparent and forthcoming with your evaluator is really important, right? You're gonna, you know, pick someone that you trust and that you want to work with. You need to be transparent with them about like if there's problems within the program or, you know, maybe something that you're observing that isn't really working well. Make sure you let them know and be forthcoming with data that you already have, things like that. The more transparent you can be with an evaluator, the better service they're going to be able to provide. It is a collaboration and a partnership, right? So like my goal with every client that I work with is like, I want the best for my clients. Like I want them to be doing the best work that they can possibly do to help them do more good, right? And so it is a partnership where my goal is to help them do even better. And so make sure that, you know, when you're selecting someone to work with, it's someone that you kind of mesh with, you know, like you're going to be talking to this person a lot. You want to make sure that your values align. That was my next point. I didn't have a next point, but like you want to know that they care about your mission, that they, you know, just what is their perspective, right? Like I said, my goal is not to come in and tell you what you're doing wrong. Most evaluators aren't like that. Some, maybe, I don't know. So just think about those kinds of things. Your evaluation should always be customized to fit your needs, right? So I always recommend doing a consultation at the beginning, making sure that, that the evaluation fits your goals, your objectives, your clients. You know, again, are we talking to kids? Are we talking to 40-year-old college educated people? We need to know that. Is it within your budget? You know, those kinds of things. And then here's some nitty gritty stuff, right? Always have a contract with the evaluator. Okay. This is good legal practice for any business, any nonprofit. You should always have a contract. You always want a detailed scope of work, right? So again, have a consultation before you ever even agree to work with an evaluator. Tell them what you're looking for, what your goals are. Ask them what an evaluation plan would look like. Tell them the budget. If you have a budget, don't make them guess, right? Like if you tell me what your budget is, then I can put together an evaluation plan that fits in your budget. If I don't know your budget and I come up with some grand plan and then you're like, oh yeah, I can't afford that. Now I have to take things away and it looks like you're getting less because you are getting less, right? Because I'm taking away services. So if I just know from up front, you know, here's what we got to work with, then we can fit the scope to match your budget. Always also have a project kickoff meeting. So once you do come to an agreement on budget, you get a contract signed, have a project kickoff meeting with your team. Anybody who's going to be highly involved with the evaluation, make sure that they get to know the evaluator, and that kind of thing. So everyone can just be on the same page. Here's a big thing, project-based pricing versus hourly pricing. We always do project-based pricing. I don't, as a consultant, I don't like to think of myself as an hourly employee. I have that scope of work and I say, this is how much it's going to cost to do this scope of work and this task. Whether it takes me more time than I budgeted or less time than I budgeted is on me, right? But I'm giving you value by providing this service and this is what it's going to cost to do that. Hourly pricing, some people might charge hourly. I don't know many evaluators who charge hourly, but that can get unwieldy, right? Then you don't know what to expect. They don't know what to expect. Could it end up being $1,000 or $5,000? Who knows? You know, $10,000 or $20,000? Who knows? So I like project-based pricing. For me personally, I'm also a small business, so I need to know like what's coming in. And so it works best, I think, kind of all around. And that's typically what I do. Also work out the timing of payments. So if it's a short-term project, I might just say half at the beginning and half at the end. If it's a longer-term project, it might be quarterly. If it's a huge project, it's probably going to be monthly. So just make sure you work all that out and all of that is in the agreement. So, and again, you can always kind of come back to that agreement. And again, just be upfront, interview, take advantage of the free consultations that people offer, get to know them, make sure you feel comfortable with them, make sure they have the skills, that you need. But I think that this relationship can be a really, really good, working relationship and a really good partnership. The last thing that I wanted to say too is about references and referrals. So as small businesses, a lot of independent consultants are smaller businesses. There are big, huge consulting firms out there that you can hire as well. You might not get as personal and as an experience, but, we often, I'm about to put in a proposal where they've asked for 3 references. So just know that if you work with an evaluator, you might get asked to provide a reference in the future. And then certainly evaluators, love referrals. So that's a lot of ways that evaluators get other business is by being referred by previous clients. So that's just kind of a good thing to do. So, and then they of course can, help refer your business, your nonprofit too, to people in the community as well. So again, that's a mutually beneficial piece of it. And so that's what I had.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. I am so sorry, guys. We are over time.
I know we're over.
Close the Zoom. Dr. Lauren, that was so good. I knew people were going to have some questions. I didn't know they were going to have that many. So that was great. I cannot thank you enough. Today's Lunch and Learn with the Nonprofit Plug is recorded. So we'll get this up on our channel. Everyone have a fantastic week. We will be bringing Lunch and Learn back every single week starting in July, maybe even a couple sooner.
Awesome.
So, awesome. Dr. Lauren, thank you. Everyone, so nice to see you guys. Have a fantastic week.
Thank you so much for having me. See you.
Bye, everybody.